You should love what you do. How do you know if you love it? If it was taken away tomorrow, how would you feel?
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today we're going to be doing another team preview podcast. Before I do that though, just a quick reminder, I do have a Patreon and I have changed a few things over there. Patreon.com/redrock_bball. This season we're introducing a new tier, a $6 tier, the Good Bloke tier. In that you get access to the Patreon only Slack channel, priority access to Dynasty Leagues and the Red Rock Challenge Leagues, ability to message me directly over there as well for fantasy questions, plus 2 mailbag shows for Patreon subscribers per month. So Patreon only subscribers so get your questions answered on a podcast, plus during the regular season 2 shows per week. Tipping off or starting an hour, half an hour before the games tip for last minute injury news, updates for DFS lineups, for streaming ideas, and for things that have just changed in the NBA in the hour or two before those games start. So patreon.com/redrock_bball, new tier, the Good Bloke tier, check that out. Today we are looking at the San Antonio Spurs for the team preview podcast. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. To talk about the San Antonio Spurs, I'm joined by the host of the Locked On Spurs podcast, Jeff Garcia, is here with me. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Josh.
It's good to have you here. There's quite a bit to talk about with this Spurs team who's made some moves this offseason, as every team has, of course, but some big questions that need to be answered with this rotation. And that brings us straight into where I want to start this show, and that's by looking at the injury update. And of course, Dejounte Murray, the team's expected starting point guard before last season, tore his ACL and didn't play a single minute last year. So in terms of the injury recovery from Murray, we assume that he is fully fit, ready to go for training camp.
He is 100% cleared by the Spurs and doctors outside of the Spurs organization. So he is raring to go, and he's eager. He's actually in Los Angeles right now in a workout session with LeBron James and Chris Paul. So needless to say, he is ready to go.
In terms of where Murray fits on this squad, of course, Derrick White took that starting point guard job last season. How is Murray going to fit back in here? Do you think that he is going to start alongside Derrick White? Is he going to come off the bench? What are we looking at in terms of role for Dejounte Murray this season?
I think it's going to be split. I think to begin the season, though, the Spurs will probably roll with Derrick White and slowly bring Dejounte Murray back. Eventually, I do see him taking over the point guard reins. The Popovich Spurs-led group, coaching staff, doctors, as much as they've cleared him in the offseason and training camp right around the corner, I think playing against a real NBA game that he hasn't played for in close to a year now, I think they really want to see where he's at right now. There's conditioning. There's getting him familiar back with the squad. There are new pieces. I know we'll probably talk about them later to this Spurs team. But I think slowly but surely he'll eventually take the reins back as the starting point guard, and Derrick White will come off the bench.
Okay, that's interesting. I personally think White is a better prospect than Murray and works better in that point guard role. But yeah. I think if White's shooting can come along, I could see them playing together because Murray, of course, not a good shooter, not the greatest distributor, but plays excellent defense, really strong rebounder. We've seen lots of workout stuff from Dejounte Murray about improving his three-point shot. How much are you buying into that? Because this is a guy that's shot maybe 80 three-point attempts across his NBA career.
I need to see it to believe it in a real NBA game. There's obviously shooting the threes in the offseason when nobody's defending you versus a squad that's looking to shut you down. So the jury's still out for me, yeah. And it goes for both players, both White and Murray. They need to work on their outside shot, in particular the three-point shot. It's not as consistent, so that's one area of improvement the two players need to work on ahead of the new season.
Murray at the moment has an ADP over on Yahoo of 94, 97 on Fantrax. I think that is totally fair enough. On ESPN, he's too low at 138. I think he's around that 100, top 90-ish type of mark for this season. I think if he was coming in without White around and playing 32 minutes a night, we'd look a little bit more aggressively at him as, say, a top 70 guy. But because of the presence of Derrick White and all those other guards in that backcourt, it is hard to see him pushing up to 31, 32 minutes. If I gave you an over-under, Jeff, of 31 minutes a game for Dejounte Murray, what would you take?
Over 31, I think it'll eventually get there.
Okay.
I would say I take that right now, yeah.
I would actually go the under on that. I think maybe 30 is a more well, that's the number I'm looking at for him, but it could. There's so much uncertainty with how this backcourt is going to run for this season, and that's the big question mark with this Spurs team. So that does transition me to talking about Derrick White, who I'm really big on this season. Of course, we just saw him make his Team USA competitive the World Cup debut overnight. We're recording this Sunday night US time. Derrick White played a decent amount of minutes for the US there, and he really came of age in his second season last year, especially in the playoffs at that 35-point game against the Denver Nuggets. I think he really stepped up. Let's ask this question then, Jeff. Do you think they will look to start White and Murray together, or do you think that backup or that starting two-guard spot is going to be manned by, say, Bryn Forbes for the majority of the season? How do you see the backcourt lining up?
Yeah, I think eventually it'll line up where both of them will start. And then you'll have guys like Bryn Forbes and Patty Mills, DeMarre Carroll come off that bench. There's a segment of the Spurs fan base that would love to see White in that six-man role, leading that second unit. There's a part of me that kind of agrees with that. Here's a guy who can come off that bench and play both ends of the court very well, that being Derrick White. And I think if you move him into the starting lineup, you lose some defense on the perimeter. Depending on how much DeMarre Carroll proves out to be, but Bryn Forbes, Patty Mills, Marco Belinelli, they don't really scream defense, but I do see eventually Popovich toying with both White and Murray starting.
I think he will look to that at some point, definitely. On ESPN, White is ranked 147th. That's a real steal to me. I think he's a top 80 type potential, maybe. If he got 34 minutes a night, he'd be a top 50 guy, Derrick White. He blocks shots, he gets steals, he passes, he rebounds, he scores, he hits threes. His free throws are strong. There's a lot to like about Derrick White, and if I was to put him and Dejounte Murray on equal minutes, White would be the fantasy option that I would take there. So much is going to depend on how Popovich runs that in the preseason. See how we go. I think we might see 2 extra minutes from White maybe early in the season, and then maybe that drops off as Murray does push up. But I still think, given how important he is, and especially spending this offseason, Jeff, with Popovich and Team USA, I think that's important. I'm putting a real big focus on that.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's getting a head start with Popovich, with training camp right around the corner and the preseason right around the corner. It's a boost to his ego, making the Team USA squad. Yeah, maybe a lot of players dropped out, but nevertheless, he still got the nod. And there's also picking up a few things from playing with guys like Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Donovan Mitchell. And he said it himself that he's taken away all the lessons that he's learning from other players, taking that into training camp. So all in all, the looks like the ceiling is high for Derrick White.
Let's talk about DeMar DeRozan, the prime piece of the Kawhi Leonard trade a year ago. Had a pretty strong season. Didn't do everything that I guess was expected of him, but set career highs in rebounds, set career highs in assist numbers. Was the leading playmaker on this team. But played a lot of minutes at small forward for this coming year, where his defense is even more of a problem than what it is when he plays at shooting guard. He averaged 21 points a game, 6 rebounds, and 6.2 assists to be the 39th ranked player last season, but he did see, it wasn't in terms of scoring anywhere near where he'd been in the past. Do you think we'll see any of DeRozan playing the two this season? Just with all those guards that we've mentioned, White and Murray looking to get minutes, Mills, Forbes, Belinelli, Lonnie Walker, who we haven't really spoken about yet either. So is DeRozan just going to be exclusively a 3, do you think?
I think so. He was the Spurs, not only one of the better point in offensive end, he was the leading facilitator for San Antonio last year. I believe either at 9 or just a shade under 9. So that's a huge boost for the Spurs. Now, I think the Spurs, with the amount of guards they have on the table right now, add in another one or just shifting DeMar to that position, doesn't really bode well. It just make more clogging issues unless they deal some of these players away or waive them. Don't know. We'll see what happens. But nevertheless, 3 seems to be about right for DeMar DeRozan. And look, I think it's just going to be more of DeMar DeRozan at this point in his career. He is what he is, and what you see is what you get. And I think the Spurs are okay with that.
The assist numbers, I think, will take a little bit of a drop this year with Murray returning with maybe a larger role for White. Not significantly, but I think that will drop off. So that is something to bear in mind. He's ranked relatively high on ESPN at number 27. I wouldn't want to be taking him at that spot. Yahoo's got him at 49. I think he actually may finish outside the top 50 this season, but I've been wrong about DeMar DeRozan before. But I can see a little bit of a drop-off happening with DeRozan this season. We'll see how that goes, especially in his scoring. I do think that he will dip under 20 points per game this season. I still think the assists will be good, but they maybe he loses half an assist a game from where he was last season. But still, he can be a really solid points, free throw percentage, assist, and those strong rebounds from last season are really useful for a fantasy situation. Let's go to the other big name on this team now, Jeff. We're talking about LaMarcus Aldridge, who had to play. He played some center last year, but then towards the end of the year, we had Jakob Poeltl move into the starting lineup. Do you think that the opening night starting lineup will have Aldridge and Poeltl out there together?
I believe so. I think that makes sense. Aldridge, why even ask or dig deeper? He is a starter, and he will be the starting for San Antonio. Poeltl, I think his time is now. He is a very underrated offensive rebounder in the league.
Oh, yeah.
He led the Spurs in offensive rebounding last year, and he did that also in, I think it was his final season in Toronto. But nevertheless, Poeltl, he's young, he's durable. I don't know what they feed the guys in Austria, but yeah, this guy can take a hit and keep on moving. He's young. He runs the pick and roll very well with the Spurs guard rotation. And all in all, he does the dirty work in that paint rim protector. And basically, LaMarcus Aldridge doesn't want to play the 5. So why not use somebody who will play that 5, and that being Jakob Poeltl in the starting lineup?
Aldridge is 34 years of age. I don't think a lot of people realize just how old he is. So that is definitely a time when you should be worried about some decline. Now, he was the 26th ranked player overall last year, averaging 21 and 9. I do think that some other players will... I think his numbers might be similar. I think the rebounding will drop off a little bit this season, but I also wouldn't be wanting to take him at that back end of the second round. ESPN's got him at 23. No, thank you. Fantrax ADP 28, a little bit high. Yahoo at 44. I think that's about the right spot, but getting a big man who's so efficient from the field and the line is really important. But the question I now pose to you is, Jeff, okay, so they'll start Aldridge and Poeltl. Who's the backup center on this team?
Yeah, that's a big question. Who does play that backup role? Now, is it Trey Lyles? I don't know.
He's not a center, I'll tell you now.
I know, exactly. So, I mean, they had him. They had somebody who maybe could have done that. Marcus Morris, maybe he's not the traditional big, but in positionless NBA now. He could have done that, but we all know how that worked out or didn't work out. But yeah, that is a big question, and that's something they need to address in whatever's left in the offseason.
I think they're going to have to try and stagger Aldridge to play him some next. It's really hard to see. Look, the other big men on this roster, Chimezie Metu, Drew Eubanks is a two-way guy, Luka Samanic, and we know Popovich just doesn't play rookies at all, and Samanic is not ready for those minutes. There's nobody else. There's no other center on this roster. There's no other big man. Is Metu going to come in and be a regular rotation player?
Yeah. I mean, unless he opens eyes in training camp or the preseason, it's highly doubtful.
Yeah, it's a really weirdly constructed roster. That might help Aldridge in terms of fantasy value if he does have to maybe start at power forward but push across and play center. There's an early sub, get Gay in for Poeltl and then switch Aldridge across. Maybe they do that and that helps his field goal percentage, helps his rebounding numbers. But it is really curious how this roster is constructed with literally one center on it, especially considering Aldridge refuses to play his best position, which is center. Which direction shall we go now? Let's head to Rudy Gay, who's had moments starting last season, but in the end sort of found his role, or the Spurs found the role for him, coming off the bench as the sixth man. Do you see much changing for the 33-year-old Gay this year?
No, not really. I think it is what he is now. He'll start some games and come off the bench some games. You'll see maybe DeMarre Carroll rotate in. So I think he'll still be more of the same. Look, Popovich said it himself, and Buford said it himself as well at the end of the season last year, that they're all in, for all intents and purposes, they're running it back. They're bringing back everybody that played last season, and so far so good. They've done that. They re-signed Rudy Gay, so they want to stick to what they had last season. So they're probably going to stick to how they used Rudy Gay last year.
Yeah, Gay was the 85th ranked player overall last season. He played 27 minutes, and I think we've mentioned his name a couple of times. With the addition of DeMarre Carroll, we will see maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes fewer from Gay this season. Those guys both can play this similar position. Gay more offensive, Carroll more defensive. So that's going to hurt Rudy. I still think he's always been one of the best rotisserie players because he provides average value across every single category. That'll happen. It'll just be on the lower end. So as a back-end roto guy, I think he's totally fine in that 100 to 120 sort of a range, but upside for Gay is relatively limited just with these. Again, because DeMar DeRozan is going to have to be playing so much at the 3, that means that the Gay's minutes there, he limited. The addition of Carroll does limit that a little bit as well. And it's Trey Lyles in the rotation taking some of those power forward minutes. So there's a lot of interesting things in terms of how this rotation can look with the Spurs and where Gay fits in. Patty Mills, you would have to assume he's just going to do what he does. Popovich loves him. He obviously destroyed Team USA about a week ago against Popovich. He is just the Spurs, really. He is the Spurs at this point, and he is that guy who's going to come in and play those 18 to 20 minutes a night. I don't really foresee too much more from Millsy at this point.
Totally agree. Yep, I think Mills is just going to be Mills, and he is that last remnant of the Spurs glory days on the bench. Well, maybe not anymore with Tim Duncan coming back as an assistant coach, but as far as a player is concerned, yeah, Popovich needs somebody who's been there, done that with the team, and with the influx of young players that the Spurs are seeing over the last few seasons, having a guy like Mills and his Spurs knowledge will help the team greatly.
He played 23 minutes a night last season. Of course, we've got to factor in the early season injury to White and then the season-long injury to Dejounte Murray. So he's definitely not going to play the 23 minutes a night this season. If we're going with the 2 big-minute guards being Murray and Derrick White for this team, Mills being the 3rd guard, then that 4th guard is open for debate. And there are 3 names, Jeff, I think we do need to pay attention to here. There's obviously Bryn Forbes, who started last season and was the best shooter on this team, and their starting lineup could be really squished for shooting. There's Marco Belinelli, who I believe is going to be out of the rotation. And there's Lonnie Walker, the first-round pick from last year. And those 3 can't get minutes every game. So what do you think's happening with that 4th guard spot? I think that it's going to be Forbes, but he's going to suffer a pretty significant hit to his playing time.
I agree with you. I think Forbes will be that 4th guard, and his time on the court will be limited. And it begs the question too: what will they do? I believe, and I'm pretty sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, though. I think he's in his final contract year with the Spurs.
Yes, he is.
He is. So that's interesting to me, as well as Belinelli.
Yep.
So do they dangle the 2 expiring contracts out there for a team looking to find expiring contracts? Could be. Something has to give at the guard position, and you just laid it out precisely. What's the issue right now? There's just too many. Not all are going to play. Belinelli over the offseason told an Italian outlet that he wants to stay in San Antonio, that he's expecting to stay in San Antonio, but he may be the odd man out. And after it's all said and done, I would not be surprised if come trade season point next season, whenever that is, you hear his name pop up a lot. It would not surprise me, though, if at the end of the season he's not wearing silver and black.
Yeah, I don't see how Belinelli is in the rotation on most nights. I think that he's probably going to be down to be the 6th guard on this team, which means you just barely play. I don't think he's doing much. Forbes, as I said, hit a lot of threes last year, 43% three-point shooter. That's where his fantasy value came, but he played 28 minutes a night, and he is going to be, I think, the biggest loser in terms of minutes lost with Dejounte Murray returning. And if he got to 20 minutes this season, or if he got to 25 minutes this season, I'd be pretty surprised. I just don't see how the math can work to fit him in there.
The only thing I could think of is maybe if Pop really does load manage a lot of guys at that position, and that's a way to bring him in. Maybe give Dejounte a couple of nights off, and hey, guess what? Time freed up for Marco and Bryn and Lonnie. So I mean, that's the only way they can think of how they can get some time. But outside of that, nah, that's an interesting question.
Lonnie Walker's an interesting one. We'll talk about him now. He's a player that many people are drawn to because he's that sort of player that draws attention. He is a volume scorer. He doesn't do a huge amount else. A poor rebounder, not a great passer. Defensive stat slack. He's not a great shooter. But then he came out in Summer League, put up huge numbers, like 30 points in about 20 minutes in one of those games. Huge numbers. People are, don't sleep on Lonnie Walker. Lonnie Walker's going to have a big breakout. He's going to be huge. I just don't see where it fits for this season for Walker. Like, where is he getting this playing time?
Again, that clog at the guard position. He could be that last man on the bench, or find himself in and out of San Antonio and taking a trip up north to Austin to still continue to hone his craft. He's ready. I know it's a summer league, and I get it. It is what it is. But he looked like a man among boys. He's primed and ready to go. Popovich needs to start playing him a lot more. And I'm not saying 30, 25 minutes. Give him 11, give him 10, see what he can do. But at this point, there's just so many guards. Something has to give. And Lonnie could also be a victim of the guard clog that they have in the Alamo City.
Yeah, I think they also want to try him at the 3. I don't think he's anywhere near big enough. I think he's only 6'4". He's not a good defender.
He's not big enough,
He'd get cooked more than DeRozan, I think, at the 3. That's a real struggle. So to me, Walker's not a player that I'm interested in from a fantasy point of view, even long term, because I just think he just does very little else apart from score. But this year, he's just not going to get the playing time, the amount of games, unless weird stuff starts to happen with this rotation. He's down at maybe best case scenario 4th guard, but probably 5th guard, maybe 6th guard on this team, which pushes him a long way down the fantasy pecking order. We have mentioned Marco Belinelli already. Actually, I want to talk a bit about Jakob Poeltl, because we mentioned him a little bit earlier on. I really like Poeltl as a late round pick in this year's draft. ESPN's got him ranked 189th, Yahoo at 136, because both of us think he is going to be that starting center. He can block shots. He's got a very high field goal percentage. He's a strong rebounder. If your league counts offensive rebounds, he's one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA. Is there anything with his offensive game that we can see develop, though? And he played down the stretch last year, 20 minutes a game. Do you think we're looking at a 20-minute a game Poeltl? Or because of the lack of centers, as we've highlighted, he's going to have to push more to 24, 25?
He's going to push more to 24, 25. There's no doubt about that. Again, as of this recording, because he's the only big man they have at the 5 spot. But yeah, his minutes are going to increase, and then obviously his offensive numbers are going to go with that as well. He needs to develop an outside shot. He does not have not even an elbow jumper. Everything he does is at the rim, cleaning up the glass, putbacks, running pick and rolls, dunks here and there. He needs to start expanding his game. This offseason, from what I can find and what I've seen, I have not seen any type of offseason workout with him trying to work on his mid-range game, as if the Spurs need another mid-range guy. But I think he needs to expand his offensive game. If he could just get that little elbow jumper or just a jump hook shot, something, I think that'll help his game on the offensive end well, because defensively, he's great for San Antonio.
Yeah, look, he's really strong defensively. I think he's strong as a late-round pick. You got to watch his free throws. They are poor. He doesn't get to the line very often, but with an increase, or if he gets an increased offensive load, then that will definitely be an issue there. So you do have to watch that. But the blocks, the rebounds, the field goal percentage, all really strong from Jakob Poeltl. We mentioned Trey Lyles already. Do you think that Lyles is a rotation guy every night?
He might be the guy buried on the bench right now. I don't see him a rotation guy. I just don't see it with DeMarre Carroll and Gay and DeMar. I think he could be that last man on that bench.
I think the point there is that Carroll and Gay, they're two older players who have had some significant injury history, so he'll get minutes in those situations, but in terms of just regularly playing, those two guys will surely have preference. Now, Carroll's going to come in and probably play a pretty small role in terms of, or in comparison to what he played as a member of the Brooklyn Nets, more in that 20-minute a night role would be my guess for DeMarre Carroll, which leaves him pretty limited in terms of fantasy value. I don't think we need to be paying too much attention to him, but I do want to talk about the Spurs rookie, Luka Samanic. I wasn't a massive fan of that pick. What did you think of him at the time of the pick or during Summer League? And are we going to see him, or is it just all going to be for Austin?
It's all going to be for Austin. He'll get the occasional call up here and there, as all rookies do, and did it with Bryn and Lonnie and Derrick White, but does not mean anything in their rookie season. He will stay cooking in Austin until the Spurs think he's ready to go. As far as where he got selected, I think it was a bit too high at what I believe was 19.
Yep.
So I think he may have still been there at 29, but hey, things worked out. Kelton Johnson was there, so Spurs just swiped him up. I like Luka. I've seen some clips of him overseas. He's playing in professional leagues. He definitely needs to add some size to his frame. He's just a teenager, 19 years old. He's not ready yet physically, maybe not even mentally. But from what we've seen, what he can do on the court, he runs it. He has a good outside shot. I wouldn't say it's completely reliable, but it's a lot more consistent than I thought it'd be. He's not afraid to go to the rim. He can attack the basket. He has a good pair of eyes. He can find the open man. But considering the way the current roster is stacked right now, there's no way that he comes to San Antonio and gets significant minutes or even major minutes in his rookie season. He'll be cooking in Austin.
I think we have to think the same thing about Kelton Johnson as well, a wing player who had some big offensive games at Summer League. He does struggle defensively, put up very limited stats at Kentucky, low rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks, but there's always chances for those Kentucky guys to put up bigger numbers than what we saw in college. But he's going to be one of those ones, 2 years away from really being a contributor. I guess it's just to fill the hole when Carroll and Gay do move on or hit that age 35 mark, which will happen in 2 years' time.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing, exactly what I said for Luka, it applies straight to Kelton as well. It's a numbers thing. It's a roster thing. The Spurs got plenty of people at his position ready to go. He's playing that behind veterans of the game. Again, cooking in Austin. You know what? And as much as a lot of the Spurs fan base is excited about Kelton, what I saw in the Summer League, for me, the jury is still out because his outside shooting is not great, but his defense is superb. His perimeter defense, he's a hound on the defensive end, and he needs to do it on both ends of the court. And on the offensive end, it wasn't really too stellar for me.
He had a couple of big games, but overall he struggled.
Yeah.
I worry about what he's going to be in the NBA. Is he going to be any more than like a seventh man wing defender Torrey Craig type? Maybe that is, and that can be valuable for fantasy. I think he's got pretty limited value overall. Jeff, that'll cover that Spurs roster. Just go through some value and bust picks. I think the value pick, Derrick White at 147 on ESPN, is pretty ridiculous. I think DeRozan at 27 is also too high. I wouldn't want to take him at that level, but I really like the value you can get for Derrick White at this point. Dejounte Murray also at 235 on ESPN. There's a ton of value for him there. Jeff, that'll do it for me today. Thank you again for coming on. Let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and the podcast, of course.
Sure, on Twitter, it's at Jeff G Spurs Zone. Follow me there for everything under the sun when it comes to the San Antonio Spurs. And subscribe to Locked On Spurs, part of the Locked On NBA network. Pick a platform. We're there, whether it be iTunes, Stitcher, iHeart. You can find Locked On Spurs. So hit that subscription button. I'll definitely appreciate it.
You go and check out Locked On Spurs, of course, while you're checking out Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Jeff, thanks for jumping on.
Not a problem.
All right, guys, that'll do it for today's show. Make sure you're subscribing. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and on YouTube. Give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below as well. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball, on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball, and the network at Locked On NBA Net on both of those platforms. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. DeMarre Carroll.